don't know, I think there's like different ways to look at it. There's like traditional yoga, and then there's ways to apply what we've learned about movement more recently to those same principles and be a lot more effective in the movements that we're teaching, that we're sharing.
Are those principles like the awareness of what you're doing?
So like yoga is really just mainly, to me, a philosophical thing. Like it's, if you look at the 8 limbs of yoga, there's like one piece of that that's physical postures, and the rest of it is all like meditation and breath work and what do they call them, like moral observances, like non-stealing and compassion and being truthful, and like that all is apparent in the movement for sure, in the movement practices, I mean, in yoga, but like I said, I think yoga is just it's so old, it's a little outdated, and a lot of the postures that we do that come from like traditional yoga are not really relevant to the bodies that we're living in today. Does that make sense?
Right. So the physical practice, which is just one small part of this bigger picture.
Oh, for sure.
That physical practice isn't necessarily the end-all be-all for us.
No, but some people would argue that it's set in stone and that you have to do it this way or else it's not yoga. I disagree with that, personally. Because I think the whole point of yoga is like, it's mindfulness, but it's also like mind-body union. Like the word yoga roughly translates, not exactly, but roughly translates to union, mind, body, spirit. Like, and if we are purposefully practicing postures that are irrelevant to us or that could potentially be harmful, like forward folding all the time, like over and over, I just think it's not relevant.
So like, I don't know, just from what I've heard, the physical practice is what, like 2,000 years old?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Some people will tell you it's like 2,000 years old. Some people say it's like 150 years old. Really, from what I know, like yoga comes from Swedish gymnastics, and I don't remember the era that the like British troops were in India, but apparently the sun salute comes from watching British troops do burpees. And if you think about a sun salute, it's like very similar to a burpee.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So like
just
there's
slower.
that element, and then I also like from what I've read, it's like India was seen as kind of a weak country, and so they kind of created yoga as like a sport to make themselves look stronger. I don't know where I got that information, but so they kind of pulled from like Swedish gymnastics and created like Ashtanga and like some of the more traditional ones.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Bikram because Bikram is not an ancient practice. It's just some guy.
Yeah.
That, like,
Although he almost gave off the impression that it was.
Well, he lied about it. He was a pathological liar. And he got here and he said that he was like the yoga champion and all this stuff. They weren't even having championships in India at that time.
How would you even...
How old what?
How would you even compete? Like how...
Oh, they have competitions.
Seriously?
Yeah. And to me, like, that's the discrepancy between, like, what we've been doing with yoga and, like, the potential that it has. Like, if the whole point is to, like, let go of ego, then why are we competing?
It's the opposite.
It's wicked the opposite.
I mean, that's the thing that I struggle with, but also find very valuable about the physical practice of yoga that I've done, is that there is no clear objective. There's nobody I'm competing against or anything like that. Like for me, that's the biggest challenge about it, is that I don't know why I'm doing it, and yet I also feel like that's what I get out of it, is like just doing something for the sake of doing it and trying to do it well. Pretty much everything else I do physically has that very like tangible
goal,
reward, competitive element to it. So
well, I think it depends on who you learn from, because like I definitely teach that way. Like I'm like, it doesn't really matter, just just be aware of what you're doing, and like it's more about cultivating the awareness of like proprioception and just where you are in space, and getting to know your own body. But then I think really the yoga competitions come from Bikram mostly, because like I know like of a studio in Portsmouth that participates in that stuff. It's always just been weird to me.
Seems odd.
It's contortionist, and there's not like, to me it's like, why are we doing this? And if we're doing this just to pull off a certain like acrobatic move, then I'm not interested. But if we're doing this to like, I don't know, gain some insight as to like what's going on in your body, like create a moving meditation, like that's all cool. But that's also a very individual practice, like you said. Like it's hard to put a general desired outcome on that.
Yeah, which is interesting because it kind of goes to this point of, you can be from the outside doing something very similar to other people. Like in the yoga room, everyone's pretty much doing the same moves. They look similar, but maybe the internal experience or like the intention is completely different, and those people are getting completely different things out of that same experience.
Well, I feel like I'm a good example of that because I'm hypermobile in like almost all of my joints, so I can pull my body apart all day. Like I can achieve those positions for sure, but like it hurts me, and then that's exactly missing the point. And like I used to do that, and I would injure myself because I would just force it. Yeah, exactly, because everyone around me was doing it, so I'm like, I can do that. But now it's like, when I'm actually like integrated and I'm actually moving from my core, then like the range of motion is obviously way less. But then like that's the thing, like who cares?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Yeah, if we're competing over range of motion, it's
right.
It's pretty bizarre.
Like I could win.
Yeah.
But I don't want to. And I think that's missing
the point.
What? Yeah, exactly.
Also win what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gold star.
So I mean, I feel like that's what that thing that can be sort of cultivated with yoga, which hopefully was kind of the original intention of it, that sort of integration of your mind and body, being deeply connected to what you're doing in that moment. Do you feel like you're able to carry that through in other physical things you do throughout your day? Like not specifically other movement stuff, but even just walking around, cooking, whatever.
Yeah.
And is that something you try to do?
Absolutely. And that's also something that I encourage my students to do when I'm teaching. Like this awareness should come with you off of the mat and into the rest of your life. Like start to notice when you're, disengaged from your body. And kind of a side note, but like something that I tell them a lot is like when you find yourself getting really anxious, like that's a very like high, like elevated vibration. And if you can at least I tell them to wiggle their toes. I'm like, just bring your awareness literally down, like come back into your body, and like reground yourself. But and I think that's kind of where, to me, like the structural integration principles come in, because like, it absolutely should be part of your everyday. The purpose of yoga is just taking an hour to like practice that, like purposely practice that, and like have me there to remind you to inhale, to remind you to exhale, to remind you like to feel your toes on the mat, to feel your I don't know, whatever, like lower your hip bone or whatever. But it's putting in the practice so that it becomes more of a habit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. It's like you have to, like with any form of training, you kind of have to go up to your threshold and bump it a little bit further to then get adaptation, which you can use in the rest of your life. So the thing you're practicing is the practice itself. Yeah. So you have to do it in a very almost rigid formal way where you're being super focused and dialed in and following every little detail. And
just moving with intention.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be super rigid necessarily.
I guess what I mean is just like super hyper focused on what you're doing versus like, because then you can then bring maybe not all of that, but some element of that focus in little moments throughout your day. It's like you've created this like attention laser, and then you can point that wherever you want to in your day. You don't have to do that throughout your whole day, but when there's that moment where you want to have that, then it's just like you can tap into it.
Yeah. There's a guy, have you heard of Viktor E. Frankl? He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning.
I mean, I've heard so much, but I have not gotten around to it yet. There's a quote by him that's something along the lines of like, between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is like our freedom to, essentially saying like, widen the space between how you feel and what you're actually going to do about it. And I think that's just what you were saying about like mindfulness. It's like creating the breathing room to like step back and like notice when you're doing something weird with your body, or like when you're in like an uncomfortable posture or an uncomfortable conversation, like having the mental breathing room and the bandwidth to like step back and go like, how am I actually going to proceed here, instead of just being kind of a zombie to it all the time. You know? Yeah. It's like the moment to pause before.
Right. The difference
you
between
can still
a knee-jerk
do the same
reaction,
thing maybe, but you have that moment before.
Yeah, instead of the knee-jerk reaction, it's like having a more mindful and probably more effective response.
I wonder if, I feel like of all the things I do, the physical practice of yoga is maybe one of the best for that, just because I don't do anything that I feel like stirs up emotions quite as much. And I'd be interested to hear why you think that is, but like I just don't know anything that really like gets things sort of churning inside of me mentally like yoga. And
well, do you find that when you're practicing on your own or when you're in a class?
Both, I would say. Probably more on my own. Yeah. But both. Like I find, of course, anything with like hip opening stuff, it is super intense. Like,
yeah, but what the fuck does hip opening mean? I hate that phrase. What?
Why do you hate that?
Because hip opening just refers to like external rotation. Like there's so many.
All right, releasing
like we were
my
talking
quads and my hip flexors.
I was gonna say like
psoas.
like hip flexors and psoas, especially,
which are very tight.
Typically are the ones that will get more of an emotional response for sure. And like we were talking about that too with anxiety. And I mean, to me, I also, having spent so much time studying yoga and like the energy behind it, like there are different parts of the body that are associated with different emotions, and therefore like when you affect physical change, you can create an emotional response. So like the hips, from what I have learned, are all centered around it's like it's your body as your home, it's your sense of creativity, it's your sense of kind of security in your own body in a way. It's like it's a lot about feeling and emotions, and then therefore like when that gets stuck for people, it can be kind of like an emotional stuckness as well. And then you open up that physical space. It's like we were talking about with body work, like same idea.
I guess what I'm wondering is why that occurs more with the type of movements that we do in yoga than like if I'm doing a kettlebell workout. It's not a very emotional thing. It's more sort of monotone, like just
I think you
run,
might.
like gotta push. But I never, even though I'm using my quads and my hips, I'm not experiencing those shades of emotion. So is it the opening of, well, we shouldn't say opening, but
no, you can say opening. It's just the hip opening that bothers me.
Fascial adhesions or tight muscles?
I think you kind of like alluded to it earlier when you were saying like there's no desired outcome with yoga. Like I think when you're probably doing other types of training, like you're more focused on like what you're doing and trying to get somewhere, and like it's more technical, whereas yoga is just asking you to be present in your own body.
Oh.
And then
So I'm just paying attention.
You're just, well, yeah, I think so.
Maybe. There's more space for it.
Yeah. As long as it's not a super rigid practice where there's a lot of rules, like...
Yeah.
Ideally, yeah, you would have the space to just move and feel. And, like, that's really... Because I think I've said this to you before, too, like, that's why I'm not very particular about alignment with people when I'm teaching stuff. It's like, okay, well, here's my ideas about, like, why you should do it this way. And, like, I don't have an MRI on everybody in here. So, like, it's quite possible that this isn't going to work for you. And you got to be the one to, like, feel that and know that and respond accordingly. I think, like, I don't know, I guess sometimes it can be, like, kind of a mind block or an emotional block that's preventing someone from getting in a certain alignment or certain pose or whatever. But I think that's kind of the point, is it's asking you to pay attention and be purposeful in the placement of, like purposefully place each step, you know?
One thing I was curious about, like, as a yoga teacher lady, do you ever have moments where you're in front of the class, like, in the middle of a practice, and maybe it's a particularly, like, challenging pose or sequence or move or something, and you get, like, thinking in your head, like, oh God, what have I done? Like,
what to them?
In your mind, like, I can't do, like, this moment where maybe it's something physically challenging where you're like, I don't know if I can do this, and you're, like, worried about being sort of exposed, like...
You mean when I'm teaching or when I'm in a class?
Yeah. So you're at the
front.
So, like,
I tell people to do something that I don't think I can do, or that I don't think they can do.
Like, yeah, but you're leading them through it, and then you have this, like, doubt of, like, oh, I don't know, like... because your muscles are burning or it's some weird sensation or something. Do you ever have that second guess, or you're just like...
Do you mean when I'm demoing?
Demoing at the front.
Well, sometimes, but I usually just say that, like, I don't know if I can do this, and I'll just, like, try it. Because I try to be very, like, I call myself, like, a blue-collar yoga teacher. I'm like, I'm not here to, like, perform. Like, I'm not here to put on some kind of illusion that, like, I can do everything. Like, I'll try stuff, and that happens sometimes when I'm doing, like, if I'm teaching an arm balance or something that I haven't tried in a while, I'm like, oh, this might be rocky. Or, like, I'll just do it, and then I fail, and then I'm like, you get the idea. And everyone laughs, and we all move on. Like, it's not meant to be... I don't really get so nervous teaching anymore after having my own studio for 3 years, because, like, I had my community.
Right.
Like, we were all friends. So it wasn't... There was just a really cool vibe there, like... It genuinely doesn't matter, and, like, no one's judging me. I don't feel judged. Like, I'm just here to these are all suggestions. I'm not telling you to do it my way or to do it the way that I do it,
especially if you can't do it.
Well, and it's opening up the, like, space for them to fail too, because, like, a thing that I get a lot is, like, especially with more advanced postures, like, people are like, oh, I can't do that, and I'm like, it's not that you can't, it's that you don't know how. So you gotta be able to, like, you gotta be willing to try. Otherwise, you're never going to learn. So, like, try and fail, and, like, pick yourself back up over and over again. And that's, like, you know, those are life principles, too.
Yeah, I guess because I've never been a yoga teacher, it seemed like I just had the impression that it must feel like this performance that you, like, because you're the leader, you can't make any mistakes, or...
No. I mean, I do feel that way. Like, I've thought of that before. Like, when I'm demoing while I'm teaching, it's very different from, like, my actual yoga practice. Like, I'm not as connected with my body because I'm more aware of what's going on in the room.
It's interesting.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll position myself in, like, a lunge or whatever, but I'm more like looking at my students and going like, what are they doing? And then I'm feeling what I'm doing in my body and speaking to that. So like, lift your back heel up a little higher, like, press down through your front big toe, like, because that's what I'm feeling, but it's also what I'm seeing. So it's performative in that way. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like offering a visual, but no, I don't feel obligated to make it perfect.
That's good.
Yeah, I used to. Like, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think I just had this level of like comfort with the community that I had, and it was my studio, so it's like, these are my rules. Like, you can take it or leave it. I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Yeah.
No.
That's good that you have that though, and the focus on like it being like a group thing in a community, because then it's just like, oh, we're all just doing yoga together.
We're all just having fun.
I happen to have slightly more experience than some of these people, so I'm gonna like guide them, but I also can't do everything perfectly either. So.
But like I said, I think it's important that they know that. Yeah. Because as someone that like I've done yoga for I don't even know how many years now, like I know that I have a pretty like aesthetically pleasing practice.
Right.
And I think like sometimes that's the thing, like it can be intimidating to walk into a yoga studio and like see some skinny white girl up at the front like doing all these fancy postures, but then to just have some level of like humility and like be a human with them. Like they gotta know that that's not the standard, if that makes sense. Like you're not doing it wrong just because you're flailing around.
How did you communicate that to them though? Because I feel like that's common that people would feel that way.
I think it's in my tone when I'm teaching. Like I was always really mindful to not like the yoga teacher voice, like inhale, sweep your arms overhead. Exhale.
Yes, I think I know
fold.
her.
Like I hate that voice, and like my voice does not change. Like I talk the same way I'm talking to you right now. When I get up at the front of the studio, I make wicked corny dad jokes all the time. Like I just try to be super like relatable and human, so that people like. I like to try to make people laugh sometimes. So they just calm down, and I also think that like there's a difference when you're in the class. Like there's kind of a certain like rhythm or cadence to it. Which is like beautiful and important, but then it's like the questions that come after class, like, hey, I don't really get what I'm supposed to be doing here, like, can you help me? And then we just have a moment with each other to like talk about it and feel it out, and like those were always my favorite conversations, because I feel like that's where you actually get stuff done. And even just in smaller classes where I can like pick people out instead of just like when you have a room full of people, you can't really do that because I think it's embarrassing for people and and chaotic. Yeah. But like you don't like if I had a class of like 2 people who knew each other, I would be like, hey, cut it out, like stop doing that or whatever, like you're doing something weird with your face. But like in a room full of people, I'm not going to do that because it would be embarrassing, but also because I don't have the time. And when there's enough people, like the energy of the room kind of carries itself. And I'm just kind of guiding it.
All right. Thank you to Jax for sharing some of her yoga wisdom with us. As you can tell, we got cut a little bit short there. We had to scramble off the beach, get Jax back to float. So we'll probably do a part 2 sometime soon, talk a little bit more about the physical practice of yoga and what it has and what it doesn't have that we need. You can follow Jax on the Instagram at jax.mw. Check out her stuff and maybe pop in with one of her Zoom yoga classes. All right, over and out. Thank you.